Hello, I trust this message finds you well. Like you, this organization, your FOP, our staff, our executive board, your elected leaders, we have been all out trying to address the myriad of issues that are coming our way during these times of challenge. But we are making progress and working very diligently because we know how hard all of our members are working and what you are risking, not just your health and safety, but that of your families as well. Make no mistake, over the last several months, we have had many meetings with our membership, with family members of our membership, and are very clear on the challenges that all of you are facing. And that's why we've been working so hard to address the threats as well as the all-out attacks that have been made upon our officers, our profession, and also the threats upon our families as well. It's vitally important that as we continue to move forward, that you as members of this FOP make every effort to attend our regular business meetings, to participate and also provide direction for your elected leaders as we move through these times. Many of you have been to recent meetings and you know all too well the amount of information that's discussed, but it's done in a concise way. We'll make good use of your time, but it's your FOP, and so we encourage you to get involved and make your voice known. Along those lines, for the IMPD, as all of you know, we have received training on a new use of force policy. I want to make sure that our membership knows that although that training has already occurred, we have been assured that additional attention is being paid to that policy proposal. Our partners at the state level are also working with the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy Training Board to complete a review on that policy to ensure that the points that are being taught to standards established by the Law Enforcement Training Board. We're waiting for the outcome of those reviews. It's been reported on publicly by the Indianapolis media market, and we hope to have some updates on that front in the very near future. The biggest question that we have asked, so all of you know, is that one, we participated in good faith for many, many weeks with the Chief's administration on the use of force policy. And we had reached a conclusion where we felt like we had a strong mutual agreement to proactively move our agency forward. However, once again, politics appeared to be involved, and those agreements were stripped, and we were collectively received and were told what the new policy was going to be. Our question from the very beginning has been, does any of the new proposed amendments conflict with clearly established law and or state training standards? And that is the place we still find ourselves within, and hopefully we'll have some good solid answers on that in the very near future. Recognizing that puts our membership in a very difficult position because you have a foot in both arenas where you know what the clearly established law is, while at the same time being mindful of the most recent training that you received on standards that I think most subject matter experts and law enforcement professionals agree appears to create a conflict. So we are moving expeditiously to get a remedy on that solution. Our goal is to avoid any irreparable harm that could or may be done in the interim. Along those lines, we also have a proposal called Proposal 237, which is a proposal at the council that's pending right now that would create a new general orders board. Hopefully, you have seen a myriad of communications from our organization to our members on that topic, as well as many media reports that have been completed as well. Just to recap, Proposal 237 would legislatively create a General Orders Board that would supersede the existing General Orders Committee. As most of you know, a General Orders Committee exists in which 2 law enforcement officers are appointed by the Chief of Police, and 1 is appointed by the collective organization of the FOP on behalf of our membership. The point in that General Orders Committee is to provide review and advice back to the Chief of Police on any changes to policy or new policies created. because these are the practitioners who have to carry out what those policies prescribe. And with over 500 plus pages of general orders, it is imperative that our officers play a role in helping to identify if there's any conflicts that are created by any new policies or language, to provide that feedback to the chief and avoid any unnecessarily unclear policies for the protection of our community and our officers. As a result of that, I am not aware of any general order that has been rejected and rescinded by this committee because the discussions occur and any identified problems are resolved prior to implementation. That's good, effective labor management practices. However, the proposal calls for civilian input into any new policies. We have been very clear from the very beginning. We as a collective organization, a professional law enforcement organization, welcome civilian input into the policy-making provisions for any major police department, major city police department such as the IMPD. In fact, I'm quite confident that there are times that we get so focused as practitioners on the law enforcement component that we could miss the perspective of the community that we serve. That is why we have said this would be an excellent opportunity to create an advisory board to the chief of police made up of civilians to provide that perspective. However, the policy that is before the council actually hijacks the policy-making provisions for the police department, strips the authority of the chief of police to establish policy for the police department, and puts it into the hand of a new general orders board that, as proposed, is made up of 7 members, 3 of which are law enforcement officers, 2 appointed by the chief of police, 1 appointed by the overall active officers of the police department. The challenge is that it also establishes 4 additional civilians to that board, gives a controlling majority to a 4-vote majority, and does not allow for the chief of police to establish the policies for the police department. The proposal actually goes further and states that this board will have the ability to construe existing policy, make amendments to existing policy, and write new policy. The problem with that is that it puts the policy specific to how we investigate criminal cases and make criminal arrests fully into the hands of civilians who may lack the subject matter expertise of existing local, state, and national laws, as well as training standards and best practices relating to human force dynamics. As a result, we have called upon the council to entertain not providing pure control of policing policy solely to civilians, but allowing for that additional input. However, the counselors who have proposed this have made clear that they are not interested in that. They have taken additional steps that actually demonstrates a hostility towards law enforcement officers and their families, because it has explicit language that prevents and prohibits any active officer, any retired law enforcement officer who has faithfully served their community and has expertise in the field, as well as any family member of a law enforcement officer from being able to participate on the board. Here's the problem with that. That takes tax-paying citizens, tax-paying residents in Marion County who by mere circumstance have a family member that is a law enforcement officer and prohibits them from being able to participate in their own form of government. Perhaps on a board that oversees the number one function of any political structure, which is the safety of the community that puts those political leaders into position. As a result, you could have a female that has lived in Indianapolis her entire life. By mere circumstance, her brother is a law enforcement officer, not even in Indianapolis, but in California, or any other state in the country, and as a result, she would be prohibited from being able to participate in this governmentally appointed board. We have concerns with that. Additionally, the policy proposal takes an additional step forward, and as was determined in the Public Safety Committee that heard this proposal, any other civilians appointed to this board are able to participate even if they have a criminal conviction history, including felony convictions. That was clearly outlined in the Public Safety Committee. And as I shared in our testimony, it puts convicts over cops, and we have strong concerns about that. As a result, We will also include in this video the short segment of our video testimony before the Public Safety Board in which we spoke against the proposal. And we will insert that right now for
Mr. Snyder, you will come forward, please.
Good evening. My name is Rick Snyder. I serve as the president of the Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police. We rise today to say that we always welcome civilian engagement in providing community perspectives when formulating policies for community policing efforts. This, in fact, would be an excellent time and an opportunity to create a civilian advisory board for IMPD general orders. However, on behalf of our entire membership, and many in the public that we serve and communicate with daily, it is concerning that some counselors want to strip the legal authority of the Chief of Police to establish policy for the IMPD. We believe that this is a fundamental responsibility for the executive branch of local government, which carries out the responsibilities of policing for our city, and instead this proposal blurs the lines of accountability for such decisions. Such a proposal leaves the policies of the police department up to a politically appointed group. And as we just learned here tonight, we are creating a policy that will allow convicted felons to oversee and write the policy for the police department in lieu of other police officers or the family members of police officers. So allow me to be clear here tonight, Mr. Chairman, to the citizens of Indianapolis. This proposal is putting convicts over cops and their families. And it's making the mere fact that you happen to be related to a police officer an instance where it makes you a second-class citizen in this city. Furthermore, it is disheartening to see that this proposal, at such a critical time for our city, gives the appearance that some city-county councilors have lost faith in the current chief of police to effectively oversee policy and manage the police department. And as we have heard here tonight, sadly, our mayor seems to hold the same perspective on his appointed chief of police. Chief, I'm sorry that that has occurred. Change for the sake of change is not good public policy, Mr. Chairman. And as we heard from these corporate partners that we have in the city who we immensely respect, they said that they welcome enhanced civilian involvement, but I don't think they knew what they were signing on for of what we learned here tonight. And I trust that they don't believe in stripping the authority and oversight away from the chief of police for the police department. So hopefully we stand ready to find middle ground on this issue, but there are significant improvements that still need to be made that can allow all of us to achieve the ultimate goals that we mutually have, which is the safety of our community, enhancing the trust and respect, not just of the police department, but our police department to the community that we serve. We hold that very high in high esteem, but we've got to work together to do this. And to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any of these corporate partners that even took the time to reach out to our chief of police and our executive staff. I'm only aware of one that made the attempt to reach out to our organization to get the perspective of the law enforcement personnel we're talking about, who have the subject matter expertise on the laws of this city, state, and nation. So we welcome the civilian involvement. We just wish we could have had more of that before we got to this stage, and we hope that we can have it before this is eventually brought up for a final vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Snyder, and for your work with the men and women of the FOP and IMPD. Up next, Tracy.
It's important to note that when this proposal for the General Orders Board was first made, there was a very public press conference held by the two sponsors of the initial proposal. And in that press conference, they invited a gentleman to speak on behalf of the community. And that gentleman spoke, and he actually made clear that this proposal, in his opinion, did not go far enough. And in fact, he very openly called for the defunding of the police department, which raises significant concerns about what the ultimate objective is with such proposals. We learned that this same person is possibly also the vice chairman of the Marion County Democratic Party, of which is the party of the supermajority on the City County Council, which creates many, many additional concerns for us in terms of a spokesperson for these elected officials openly and publicly advocating to defund the police department. We have also included his public remarks in this video for you to review and be aware of as well.
Now we'll hear from Stuart Mora from Unite Here Local 23.
My name is Stuart Mora. I'm the Indiana president of Unite Here Local 23. Our union is people who work in the food service, hotel, and gaming industries across our state. In Indianapolis, our members are predominantly black. I'm here today to call on my fellow union leaders to acknowledge that the American labor movement, the movement we claim to lead, is built on a legacy of white supremacy. Unions in our country have a long history of excluding people of color from membership. We have a long history of ensuring that people of color could not rise into better paying jobs within our workplaces. And we have a long history of keeping people of color out of leadership positions within our organizations. Frankly, this is our fatal flaw. It is fundamental to why union membership is at its lowest level since 1952. As union leaders, we preach solidarity. We believe in solidarity. Solidarity is fundamental to who we are and what we do. But solidarity isn't just about standing with our fellow union members. Solidarity is about standing with all working people. All working people and their families. And we must acknowledge the poverty in our communities, in our own complicity in creating it. We must recommit ourselves to true solidarity. We've allowed the rich to divide us as working class people along racial lines and make us weaker. But today we are standing in solidarity with our community to ensure black and brown lives are celebrated instead of hashtags in remembrance of their lives. Today we are saying the police should not police the police. It's a simple, logical, common sense proposal that will be a small step forward in a much larger fight for racial and economic justice in our community. But we must demand bigger steps. We must demand significant defunding of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. We must demand that these resources be refunded to the poorest parts of our community in order to address the intertwined epidemics of child poverty, educational inequality, healthcare inequality, mental illness, and addiction. If you're a labor leader and you're not demanding that we defund the police and refund our community, then you are embracing the white supremacy upon which our American labor movement was founded. Look yourself in the mirror and ask if that's who you are. I believe we're better than that. This is going to be a long fight, so put down your golf clubs, pick up your picket signs and bullhorns, and get in the fight. Defund the police, refund the community. Thank you.
So with that, this proposal is scheduled to be heard for a final vote by the full City County Council this coming Monday, October the 12th at 7 p.m. Many officers have expressed their desire to make their viewpoints known upon this, even beyond the public testimony that we have provided. Many law enforcement family members have reached out with outrage at the blatant restrictions placed upon them in being able to participate in their own government. And we have taken steps to be able to ensure that all voices are heard by encouraging our officers and, more importantly, family members of officers to share your thoughts with your elected officials. You can go to the Indianapolis website and be able to forward your thoughts via email to your city county councilors. But I strongly encourage you to give consideration to sharing your thoughts with our mayor, Joe Hogsett, who has made very clear when he ran and sought the support of our law enforcement family that he would be the public safety director for the city of Indianapolis and that the buck would stop with him. Our concern is that if he supports this proposal, it would be an open abdication of his responsibility and authority over the police department to this politically appointed board. And that is simply should not be acceptable. In addition, we firmly believe it will blur the lines of accountability for who is actually responsible for the police department, and that should be avoided at all costs. This isn't just about authority, but it's about accountability and who is responsible for the policies and the subsequent decisions that have to be made from that. Along those lines, also on Monday, October the 12th at 7 p.m., the full City County Council will also be voting on the overall 2021 budget for the IMPD. As I shared with you, as all of you know, there have been many public outcries and demands for the defunding of the police department. As of now, we feel good that the proposed budget for IMPD, as proposed, passed out of the Public Safety Committee this week and is set to be voted upon Monday night as well. However, at the Public Safety Committee hearing, where the vote was held on this proposed budget, there were very strong statements made by a representative of a agenda-driven group in the city of Indianapolis who made their thoughts very well known and called openly again for the police department to be defunded. And we have included testimony, public testimony from them as well in this video for you to be able to review and be aware of as well.
Jessica Louise, Indy 10, Black Lives Matter. I had something written and I was prepared to read it to you. I was prepared to face my community, face Chief Taylor, and face the murderous bloodhounds of IMPD and let them know that they don't deserve another dime. I'm speaking from the heart tonight. I'm speaking as someone who has labored for the last 5 months comforting the mother and family of Drajon Reed. I'm speaking to you on behalf of the community who is upset that this man who you have allowed to be chief and remain in his position.
We're not doing that. We're not pointing at the chief. You can talk, you make your comments towards me. We're not pointing at the chief.
It's a finger. He has remained in office and has allowed the killers of a 19-year-old child to return to work without any sort of public transparency. The time for reform has passed. 7 years ago, which predates some of the time that you were elected to your current offices, we called for reform. We asked for IMPD under Chief Height to implement mental health practices, psychological evaluations, cultural competency, as well as evaluations that would establish whether or not they were fit to serve their community. They've consistently refused. I missed the last meeting, but the meeting prior to that, Chief Taylor said that to gauge someone's mental health capacity, he could send out a survey to his officers. You're allotting $261 million to these people who are not serving communities, who do not live in our communities. They do not want what's best for us. We've said it time and time again. We've made it clear. We've come to your doors. We've come to Chief Taylor's door. We've come to Mayor Hogsett's door. We've protested. We've demonstrated. You've seen the uprisings. We have consulted. We have cried. We have gnashed our teeth and pulled our hair. We are tired of asking. We are truly tired of asking. If you stand with these murderous bloodhounds and pour another dollar into them, may God have mercy on your soul. But you'll never have a moment's rest as long as I live.
What you will find is that in that Public Safety Committee, there was only one counselor who voted no related to the budget. That happens to be someone who also, prior to being on the council, was a spokesperson and a representative for that very same agenda-driven group that called for the defunding of the police department. They are now on the City County Council. With that being said, what we are finding from you, our members, that you are sharing with us, and we're also experiencing, is that residents throughout the city, one, are unaware of this proposal to strip the authority of policymaking from the chief of police, and two, they are very much opposed to the concept, and three, they also oppose the idea of defunding the police department. I have shared publicly in many interviews that the vast majority of folks in the communities, not just here in Indianapolis but across the country, do not support defunding police departments. And in fact, what we find is that oftentimes the most marginalized folks in our communities would be affected the most by such a step. And therefore, we see great opposition to that. You all have shared with me that you have been flagged down at intersections and in restaurants and on police runs by residents in the communities and the neighborhoods that we serve, where folks are begging us not to leave, not to give up, not to back down, because they know what is at stake. As I have always said, it's our residents and our officers that are in the neighborhoods 24 hours a day. They literally have the most skin in the game, and they know what is at risk here. But it is politicians and other agenda-driven groups who come in and drive a wedge between our officers and the neighborhoods we serve and get us to point fingers at one another, all while they leverage that lawlessness, that strife, for their own political agendas. I just want to share with you, though, of another example of from a resident who reached out to us to share their thoughts, and they wanted this relayed to the members of the FOP. I want to share it with you because I think it's important for you to hear a perspective that isn't normally covered in the local media. The letter says, "Dear President and members of the Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police, not only should politics be kept out of policing, but these Indianapolis representatives need to be kept out of policing and policy making as well. I am an almost 80-year-old black American female and a taxpayer, and I question this sudden call and push for oversight of IMPD. Oversight by who and for what? To coddle and protect criminals and chronic lawbreakers? No, sir. I definitely want and expect all of us who are law-abiding citizens and residents of Indianapolis to be protected by IMPD from criminals and lawbreakers. Please do not listen to these advocates because they are calling and pushing because what they are calling and pushing for will only make things worse by causing more criminals and lawbreakers to come out and boldly and in full force. Be sure to know that these outspoken advocates have their own agenda, and furthermore, these advocates are not supported in their calls. They also are in conflict with God Almighty to interfere with what He Himself has ordained and has written in His Word. Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7, if you want to look at that. Please do everything within your power to block and stop this call and push for oversight of IMPD. We who obey the laws don't want a weak police department. Thank you and God bless. Sincerely, from someone who appreciates law enforcement officers." Again, a very strongly worded letter that is calling for there to be a block, a rejection of this call to push for further oversight of the police department. And listen, it's not about oversight, it's about ceding control of the agency, the policy making, the direction of our officers from an accountable chief of police to a civilian board that lacks the oversight of the community that it is supposed to represent, which is our entire community and city. So I wanted to share that with you. I want you to know that people are supporting you. They're standing with you. I fully expect that we will hear from more and more folks in the community in the coming days. And we will keep pushing forward. Finally, we have recently become aware that it sounds like the police department, for whatever reason, has taken steps to sell the one and only helicopter we have for the agency. That means that if that has occurred, we have lost air support for our officers for critical safety issues related to police pursuits or armed suspects who have fled and are hiding somewhere, even at night, where we could use technology to help safely locate them without further risking the lives of our officers. And What's further troubling is no one reached out to us to have discussions about that or what the impacts would be. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of that, but we want you to be aware of it. Hopefully it's not completely correct, but we're going to see what we can find out. That is a very important tool, especially at the time where we've been amending pursuit policies where air support is even more critically needed. We just had an incident not too long ago in Plainfield where a car was stolen with an infant inside the car located in Indianapolis. Gratefully, the child was recovered safely and so was the vehicle. But if that suspect had fled in the vehicle with the child inside, it would have been critically important to have a police helicopter in service to provide air support and a view so that we could take steps to safely apprehend the suspect and ensure the safety of the child. So that's just one of many examples that are at risk with such a decision. And finally, many of you have reached out because you found out about proposed changes to our K-9 policies, standard operating procedures, through the media versus through our police department. We're working to learn more about that. We have not had involvement or been asked to be involved in any of those decisions or discussions. Both changes to K-9 policy and our air support are changes to equipment and steps that are taken to ensure the safety of our officers. So I do anticipate we will be requesting a meeting to review those discussions related as an emergency safety and equipment meeting for that review. Finally, I just want you to know that we will continue to work on your behalf, to stand for the things that need to be done, to seek out further engagement from our community in a way that moves us forward and doesn't move us backward. And we will continue to do that. But again, we need you to be actively involved. Finally, this last week, we buried our fellow IMPD officer, Sergeant Bob Hatch. And we laid him to rest after 12 years of a battle with cancer. Bob was also a executive board member. He was one of your elected leaders here at the FOP and helped provide direction and insight to the many challenges that we face. He was a strong proponent of being actively engaged on behalf of our officers, and we send our prayers continuously to his wife and his children, and we ask that you do so as well.